Sup peoples, and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking all about the use of flashbacks, visions, and foreshadowing in writing, and why I think they're sort of connected. So let's get started. First up, I'm going to talk about foreshadowing, because I think that this is super important for stories, especially if you want to make them feel more epic. Foreshadowing is a great way to add suspense or tension to your story. It's sort of like leaving a little trail of breadcrumbs for your readers, hinting at things that are to come. I find that this makes it feel more realistic when they do happen, and it also just makes everything feel a little bit more like you're building towards something. All my favorite stories end up using foreshadowing quite a lot, and next week I'm going to be releasing a video breaking down some of my favorite animated shows and how they use foreshadowing and the slow build to make things feel grand and epic. But for now, I'm not telling you how other stories use foreshadowing, I'm telling you how you can use foreshadowing. So view foreshadowing as your way to make things feel inevitable. I especially like foreshadowing when it comes to villains or whatever the evil in your story is. The antagonist having foreshadowing and little things hinted along the way just makes it feel more threatening. To use one of the examples I'll be going over next time, Gravity Falls. Spoilers for the big mystery and plot of Gravity Falls, so if you want to be surprised, skip to the number that I will show on the screen. Okay, you have not skipped. You're either ready to be spoiled or you've already seen this amazing show. So, in Gravity Falls, the antagonist is Bill Cipher. And even though we don't actually realize how major of an antagonist Bill is until like season 2 and a good way into season 2, we still get to see signs of everything that's already occurred in the past. The fact that there are Bill-shaped windows in the house, the way that the writing in the journal talks about a mysterious entity. All sorts of things are sprinkled in and hinted at so that you are really excited to find out what the big mystery is. No more spoilers for Gravity Falls from this point on. Using something along the lines of sprinkling in hints of what is to come can make your readers more engaged. It becomes an instant page turner. They have to know what happens. But also, you're making it feel more real. It's not like in real life there would be no signs of something bad about to happen and then it would just happen, unless it was something surprising. But if it was something that someone had been planning for, like a bad deed that they'd been planning for months, there would be little signs that you could notice. And even if you didn't pick up on them, looking back, they would become more apparent. So let's say that I am planning a prank on my sister. I've been working on this for months because it's a really elaborate prank. I don't know where this example came from. Let's just roll with it. So I've been working on this for months. I've been finding things out. I've been setting things up around the house. She notices some odd behavior, but she thinks nothing of it at the time. Once the prank has already happened, though, looking back, she's like, I should have seen it coming. That's how you want your readers to feel. It'll make your world and the things that happen in it feel more real because you can see the setup looking back. I personally love foreshadowing, and that's why next week's video is going to be all about the way that animated shows do it and why I love them so much. So definitely subscribe if you haven't yet so you don't miss that video if you're interested in this topic, which I mean you clicked on the video so hopefully you are. Foreshadowing can also be used to make things feel much more scary. We're usually more scared of the unknown. So if you just hint and leave little clues that something is going to happen, something big, something's coming, it's probably going to feel more intense than the thing actually happening. So this is a great way to use it in like a mystery or a thriller or horror novel. Just using the unknown and the clues. Your readers are going to get wrapped up in the mystery. They're going to want to know what happens next. Even if your story isn't a mystery, you can use this to make them want to know why a character is acting a certain way. It will get them more invested into the plot. Like in my own story, Project Punk, which I will link the playlist up above where I talk all about writing that, and I'm currently vlogging it, does feature a mystery, which I will not be spoiling, but I've been using tons of foreshadowing, setting up a plot twist that will come along later. Speaking of my comic book series, I want to talk about how you can use narration to foreshadow things in your story. I honestly don't want to spoil this scene. I'm not going to spoil this scene from Saga. However, I'm going to show one scene on the screen. The narration in this scene is Not everybody does. This was some of my favorite narration, and I absolutely love the narration in Saga because the way that it works is it's the story of Hazel, our protagonist, growing up, but the story is narrated by already grown-up Hazel. So she knows everything that's happening. So she can do tons of foreshadowing with her narration. So there's this bit of narration over a very cute, heartfelt scene in the first issue, and this comes in many issues later for one of the most dramatic and story-changing moments of the entire series. I will not say anything more than that, but the way that they used the same exact narration in both scenes blew my mind. It was so amazingly well done. And it's just little things like this that you can set up and that people who notice will really notice. I don't know if it was planned from the start or if it just worked out that way, but in my own series, I've tried to do things like that and set things up so that one day when it happens, the readers are like, that's what that meant. Okay, now that I have hopefully sold you on the use of foreshadowing, let's talk about flashbacks. Now, I know that a lot of people probably will be like, why is foreshadowing, flashbacks, and visions all in the same section? Now, I love to use flashbacks and visions as foreshadowing. There was this one series that I started writing that I never actually finished because I started writing Project Punk instead, but I plan to go back to it eventually, where one of the characters was like a seer. He had visions. And I would use these visions as very cryptic things, and sometimes I would use these visions of other people's flashbacks. That might be confusing. So let's take a scene, for example, where he has a vision of another character's childhood. He does not know who this character is. He does not know why he's having this vision, but it's setting something up for the future when he meets this character and realizes how important they are to the plot. So in this way, I'm using a vision, a flashback, and foreshadowing all at once. I love to do that. I really like to leave little breadcrumbs, and I like to do that through visuals, especially. So now I know that not everybody likes flashbacks. I personally love flashbacks. I feature them in my own writing and pretty much everything. One of my favorite issues of Project Punk is my flashback issue, which is just 20 pages of flashbacks. There's a trigger, though, which makes sense. And that is what I want to talk to you about first. If your character is going to have a flashback, they should have a reason to have that flashback. If it's just like they're walking down the street and suddenly you're in the middle of a really dramatic flashback of their past, your reader's just going to be confused. So that's why I like to use triggers. For example, your character is walking down the street. They see a cat. It reminds them of their old pet cat, so they flash back to a memory of their cat. You could do this with something much more dramatic. So let's say your character has a troubled relationship with their parents. They see another character having either a similar relationship to their parents or even a really positive relationship to their parents. And it just brings up all this unresolved stuff with their own parents. So let's say Alice and Kyle, that's their names. Alice has a complicated and not very great relationship with her parents. Kyle has a great relationship with his parents. Kyle and Alice are friends. They're hanging out. Kyle's parents are nearby and he starts talking to them and they're getting along. Alice becomes sort of jealous. She gets very emotional. She leaves. In the story, this is shown through her getting upset, leaving, and then on her way home after leaving, she has a flashback of her own not so great relationship with her parents. In this way, you are setting it up to make sense for the reader. You're showing, oh, this character feels a certain way about this situation. It's triggering to them. Why? And then you show why. I think that having a trigger can work wonders for making a flashback feel like it fits into the story. Now, I really believe in the importance of backstory. You can check out the playlist I have up above where I talk about it quite a lot as how I make my characters relatable and complex. So I have creating complex villains and creating relatable protagonists. There's more stuff in there than just that, but I have those two videos and they're sort of the backbone of my how to make characters playlist. And I'm really proud of both of those, so if you want to check them out, you should do that. But anyway, I think that backstory is super important to making your characters complex, relatable, all sorts of things like that. People have a history. Even if it's not a tragic history, their history still shaped who they are today. So, for example, Alice having an unhealthy relationship with her parents. That is a huge thing about her personality, I'm sure. So it would influence the way that she acts. You can hint at this, you can have the characters say it, but my favorite method personally is to actually show the scenes that changed the character's life and their relationship with those people. But that brings me to my final point about flashbacks, which is make sure they matter. If you have a flashback every other scene in your story, they're just about mundane things that we don't really know or care about, it's not gonna work. It's just gonna be like, why are they doing this? If your story is set in 2 different timelines, so that it makes sense for them to have flashbacks every other scene, cool. I think that's an awesome concept. But if your story is set in the present, but you're just flashing back constantly, that just takes the importance out of the moments that you really should have flashed back to. So try and make sure that you use this sparingly and to emphasize certain points. I wrote this flashback scene and issue in my series, and then I haven't done any flashbacks since then. And I don't currently have any plans to write further flashbacks. Potentially, there could be one if an opportunity arose, but I think it'll probably just be that issue, which was setting up their backstories. Now we're on to the next section, which is visions. I already said why I grouped this all into foreshadowing, so I'm just gonna jump right into it. I love visions. I wish more of my characters could be seers or have the sight or whatever it is. They're so fun to play with. They're such a great way to use foreshadowing. Visions are a great tool for foreshadowing, but you have to make sure they fit into your story. They don't fit into every story. For that reason, there have so far been no visions in Project Punk. I know. It's tragic. It's truly tragic. But I still wanted to talk about using them because they're awesome. If you can come up with a reason for visions and they fit into your story, then they can be a great way to have foreshadowing appear in your story. I also think that you should have triggers for your visions, the same way that I talked about having triggers for your flashbacks. Of course, if a character just randomly has visions and that's sort of their thing, like they can't control it, then that's a trigger in and of itself. I did write a character who could not control their abilities and would randomly have visions, and I think that totally works, but then you have to follow the rules of they can't control it and randomly have visions, so they can't just have them on command. If you have a vision that's very vague, but not so vague to annoy your reader, that's a fine line to walk, or of something that you don't know why it's important yet, I think that it can be really helpful for setting up when that character does arrive. So for example, my character, who we will call Alan. My character Alan cannot control having visions. Once in a while, he'll just randomly have one. He saw a little girl who was something, so I don't spoil anything for the story when I eventually finish writing it. Then he just snapped out of it. When he now meets that little girl as an adult in the future, it's gonna feel epic. It's gonna be like, wait, you've been setting this up. It's the perfect foreshadowing. You're leaving a trail of visions for your readers to try and decipher and figure out what's happening. If you let your character try and figure out the mystery alongside your protagonist, it makes them feel more like they're a part of the story. Now, if you are interested in all of this foreshadowing, flashbacks, visions talk, then you'll probably be interested in next week's video, which I have already talked about a little bit, which is going to be all about how my favorite animated cartoons use the slow build to create truly epic stories. And they use foreshadowing so well. It's one of the things that I find most impressive. I am a total nerd. I love animated shows, and I think that they can be really, really well done. The Owl House, Gravity Falls, Star vs. the Forces of Evil, and Amphibia will all be bringing their own tips to the next video, which will be coming out Wednesday. So subscribe if you haven't already so that you don't miss that video when it comes out, or head over to my channel if you're from the future and check it out right now. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments if you've ever used foreshadowing, flashbacks, anything like that. I would love to hear because they're like some of my favorite things ever. And I will see you in the next video. Happy writing!